Welcome, everyone, to the European Masters play-ins. My name is Scoundrel, and kicking off the day with me here is going to be Veteran, very special surprise guest that we brought in last minute, and we have Ibris as well, returning from yesterday, and we are ready to dive into the day of the second day of play-ins, which is essentially the last day of play-ins, because after today, we will have our tiebreakers, and we'll know who will be making it to the European Masters group stages, which will be later at the end of April. Well, let's take a look at the schedule for today before we dive into anything major. Guys, this is what we've got coming up. We will be covering Asus Rogue Elite versus Asuba, Intrepid Fox Gaming versus Cyber Gaming, Sector 1 versus Kick Neosurf, and then rounding out the day will be WLG versus Pig, Cyber versus Electronic, and then Decider versus Decider, which is obviously one of our Decider matches at the end of the day. I'll start with you, Veteran. Any games that you're particularly looking forward to today, things that you could be a good watch for the viewer?
Oh, I mean, there are plenty of games that would be really good today. Honestly, the first game of the day, I'm really excited to see, just because I'm a massive fan of Jakey. I'm excited to see how Mad Lions do for the rest of the day. They looked a lot rustier than people expected them to be yesterday. Out of all the teams yesterday, probably the biggest surprises for me were Sector 1, but also Raccoon over in Group B. I was actually very impressed by how they were playing out the game. Generally, the Italian League has actually been surprising us a lot over the course of the split for anyone who's been following it, and for Raccoon to come out of nowhere as well and be able to show up like they did was very impressive. So,
what about you, Ibris? Anything that you particularly excited about today?
So again, playing off of what Veteran said about Sector 1 in particular, I was not entirely sold on the Benelux regions as a whole coming into this, of course. Granted, this is a Benelux stream, so we got to be a little bit careful about how much we give away. But Sector 1, they were very decisive in their macro. They played through their win conditions pretty reliably. And actually, they have a legitimate chance of escaping that group with their seed, provided that they can actually take it to Kick this time around. Because yesterday, they lost to Kick, not so great. Considering WLG managed to topple that giant, I think that Sector 1 definitely have it within their grasp to be making a convincing case for first seed of Group D.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of surprises. Specifically talking about Mad Lions, the surprise win for Kenty was pretty huge, and I saw Hat-Tricks tweeting about it, saying they just played a good game and we just didn't expect it. And I think Mad Lions got a lot of work to do. Obviously, on the other side of the coin, looking at another major region, obviously Gamer Legion, they're just looking fantastic. We expected them to look good, and they're looking great in Group A. They are the likely first seed coming out, probably the likely first seed coming out of the entire play-in stage with the way that they're playing right now. Let's take a look at some of the results from, or rather the group stage graphics. We can have a look at what's going on in those individual groups. Let's take a look at Group A to begin with. I mentioned Gamer Legion right here. That was pretty convincing for them yesterday. Anybody else that we should really keep our eyes on here, starting with you, Ibris?
So looking at Asuba versus Asus, which will be our first game of the day. Asuba, they're fine. They're good. They have good mid-jungle, as you mentioned, Veteran, with Jakey and Random being pretty hyped up coming into it. But if you look at Asus Rogue Elite, this team changed their roster almost entirely heading into this week. And I think that the 1-2 showing in day one had a little bit of promise to it. Enough for me to think that, hey, now that they've got legitimately another 20% additional game time of this roster actually being together, because they've only been together 4 days before this event started, they could legitimately make a convincing case for the second seed here, but first seed, most definitely in control of Gamer Legion.
Yeah, I think that's looking the case. Let's move on to Group B here, and I'll bring Veteran in to bring his opinion here. Raccoon there at 3-0, Intrepid Fox Gaming at 2-1. Any other sort of names that we want to keep an eye on in this particular group?
Well, in terms of individual names, I mean, Intrepid Fox Gaming are full of them, right? Like the vast majority of people are fully aware of Punisher, but Delito is coming back in from last year. A very strong showing on Rumble last year. This time bringing out Renekton, bringing out Zach as well, showing he can play kind of both sides of the map. Arpen is kind of the glue that is holding that team together. So I really like to see him. But when it comes to Raccoon, the big deal with Raccoon is that it's less about the individual players there and more about the way that they are playing out the entire map. It's very difficult to kind of find holes in their early game. Most of the ways that they are playing out their matchups are fundamentally strong, which I guess we could say is a lot to expect from kind of like a lower tier play-in team. But with Raccoon, if they do play hard to top side, it's not like they fully abandon bot side, which is more than we can say for example, Cyber Gaming, who play a bit more of like a solo queue style, right? Raccoon play like a team that is looking to compete on a professional level. And it's very surprising to see a team being able to juggle about wave management in the way that Raccoon has been doing so. You can't really just put it all on the jungler controlling the map there, all on support jungle, or all on like midsection or something like that, like you can do to a lot of other teams here. That is definitely a team effort, and it's very, very impressive from them.
Yeah, I think Raccoon has been the surprise for me in that group in its entirety. I was not expecting them to be in the position that they're in coming into day 2. So another potential dark horse to make it into a good position in this play-ins, maybe even surprise us and get to the group stages as well. We'll have to see. Let's take a look at Group C, and I believe Veteran again. We wanted to talk a little bit about some of the players here. Specifically, I mean, Mad Lions, they are currently tied with Diffuse Kids and Kenty, where they should just be crushing this group, right?
Yeah, I mean, people would generally assume that the Spanish league in and of itself has not actually looked as strong this year as it has in previous years. I know there's a lot of expectations coming in because of Giant's phenomenal performance in the last EU Masters. But Mad Lions game versus Kenty, sure, Hatchers can say that Kenty came in looking a lot stronger than they expected. And obviously just Kenty picking up a win versus a team from a major region isn't something anybody would expect. But honestly, the way Mad Lions were playing out individual situations in that game, it reeked of desperation for a long time, even when they had Elder, when they had Baron, when they had Soul, and they had every single objective on the map to be able to close out this game. They just couldn't find openings. Part of that could be said to be due to draft, right? Like they had Ornn, they had Syndra, they had champions that are very difficult to accelerate on the side of Kenty, and they had a Mercs Treads like Kingdom going everywhere versus the LeBlanc, the signature LeBlanc this year coming out from Hattricks. But outside of not being able to close the game, when they had prime opportunities, like a fight breaking out in midsection where they easily grab inhibitor, they would simply extend far too much. And in a fully extended duel, the stats on the right are just a hell of a lot better than what Mad Lions had. Mad Lions have single target burst. Once that's gone, once all their cooldowns are done, they can't keep committing to the fight. But you know, you just see Whirlib running it out there, right? And then suddenly Kenty would be back in the game. They would win a fight sometimes, like when they might finally caught in midsection in 2 individual kills before turning on towards Baron, but then they turn to find another individual kill and then they have to reset, can't do Baron anymore, and Kenty are first in on the Baron. These are mistakes Mad Lions are making rather than positives Kenty has. Kenty capitalized on them, and Kenty's composition is difficult to just find that like ace into 3 objectives, sure, but apparently if Mad Lions don't find that, they're not like gods around the map or anything, and they are actually very open to abuse.
Yeah, and obviously that could be tested when we get to those decider stages, and if Mad Lions don't come out as first seed of their group, they may end up in a situation where they're staring down the barrel of someone like Gamer Legion for a potential shoe-in to the group stages. So I'm not sure the groups work that way. I don't know exactly which seed is going to match up against which seed, but it could be the case that Mad Lions have to face Gamer Legion, and that would not be a good look for them leaving the play-in stages of the European Masters. Let's move on to Group D finally. We'll have a look at the results from that game. And Ibris, talk to me about this group. Again, a very split group right now with only Pig being down at the bottom at 0-3.
So this group is really weird to me, because Pig are doing so poorly. I mean, we expected them to because, yeah, it's Baltics, but they were actually the first seed from that region after having toppled Kenty leading into the EU Masters play-in stage, and yet Kenty look infinitely times more stronger than Pig, because Pig not looking too hot, let me tell you. But anyway, why are we talking about Pig when it's clearly the story of the 3 other teams in this group? You have Kick, who are super hyped heading into the finals of the Ultraliga, Poland's premier regional league, of course. And yeah, they fell to Rogue. Yeah, it wasn't that close, but during the regular season, during the rest of playoffs, Kick looked pretty clean. Kick looked like they could make the enemy team play this kind of slow, dragged out kind of play style that they like to promote, where they have the superior team fighting to fall back on. But it's that slow play style that got preyed upon by WLG and Sector 1 in the games earlier in this group stage.
A lot of recognizable names on Kick as well. If you have been keeping up with the European Masters, you'll recognize people like Matislaw, Schlatten, and Ibo. They've all been in and around this level of competition before as well. So they are, they are players. They've got the pedigree behind them when it comes to European Masters. Matislaw, I think, has been in 2 previous European Masters at the very least. So he's got some pedigree coming from the Polish region as well. Again, they are probably the team that most people expected to get out of this group as first seed with relative ease. But WLG have been a little bit surprising too, Veteran. That's been a very interesting group to watch, and I think will be continue to be a pretty interesting group to watch for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I also like all the opportunities we have there to talk about Icebreaker versus Ice Beasto, now Ibo. But if we refer to him by his former name, I love all the opportunities we have in cast there.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. So guys, that was kind of yesterday. That's where we're at right now. I think the biggest surprises was Mad Lions dropping a game. We've had some split groups. I don't think anybody is surprised by Gamer Legion being 3-0 in their group. I think they arguably are the strongest team in the playing stage in its entirety. I mean, it looks like the Dark Region, the Prime League is aiming to make a back-to-back European Masters with the strength of the teams that they have coming into this competition. But let's talk about today, because we have, in about 5 to 10 minutes time, we've got ASU versus Asuba. So we've got a pretty solid game coming your way. Let's start with Veteran, because I know that you want to touch on Jakey. I know you're a big fan of that guy.
Yes.
Let's talk about this matchup.
I mean, Jakey is the best jungler nobody has ever heard of. That's how I have to refer to him now. He's been a phenomenal jungler for the last few years. Yesterday, he put on an absolute clinic in the games that I was watching from him. And honestly, I'm super excited to see him come out today. I think he's going to have a massive advantage. And most of the advantages that Asus Rogue Elite had when it came to players that we know are historically strong around the map that could maybe match Jakey's aggression. And you can see from Isuba's side, that team has full confidence in Jakey's calls and what Jakey wants to do. I feel like they ended up getting rid of that. They've gone through a ton of roster changes recently and getting rid of a support that I praised very heavily in the last EU Masters, Tasteless, who was a very good linchpin of those sorts of plays. It's still a strong roster, but I'm not sure that it's going to be able to take on Isuba, who are already 2-1 up in Group A, and they actually look like a team that's finally going to make it into a best of stage, and that I will actually finally get to see potentially try to make it into the main stage. I've always wanted to see Jakey be able to take on some of the best junglers, and every time that we don't get that, I feel a little bit robbed. This guy 100% deserves to move forward, and I expect him to put on another clinic today.
And Ibris, what have you seen from Asuba so far? Has it been the Jakey show, or is there anybody else in the roster that we should really keep our eyes on?
So I think that, yeah, we are right to credit Jakey with a lot of this team's success. When they were playing domestically in the Hitpoint Masters, of course, they were mostly playing through mid, actually, and Random is okay. I think he's probably like top 10, top 12 mids overall in EU Masters, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, considering you have so many teams from major regions per se, and the fact that this like wild card mid laner, as it were, can hang his head up high with the rest of the mids in that group, it's still pretty good. But thinking about their showings yesterday, wasn't entirely sold on how they dispatched Vipers Inc., who are widely considered and clearly indicated to be the weaker team of Group A, because they had a dominant lead 15 minutes in, 20 minutes in, 25 minutes in, but they weren't closing. They even gave a quadra kill and I think an unofficial penta back over to the AD carry of Vipers in the mid game, and then just prolonged it all by another 10-15 minutes where they could have closed. And I think against better teams, they are going to get exposed. But hey, Jakey does his thing in the early game, and the rest of the team should be able to pilot them that to a mid game finish.
Yeah, actually, speaking of Vipers who are in the same group, I'm kind of sad that they're 0-2. I think that having cast the Nordic region, I kind of got a little soft spot for Nordic teams. Sure. They've never classically performed particularly well at European Masters, but I think Vipers, I think you kind of summed it up there. Den Voxney was kind of just the guy for Vipers. Like, if he didn't do well, Vipers generally didn't do particularly well either. But let's have a look at we've got to move away from Vipers, because obviously we need to focus on the opposition that Asuba have, which is Asus Rogue Elite. 0-2 in the group right now. I know, Veteran, you touched on it. Asus Rogue Elite have classically always been a strong contender coming from their region. Yes. And I think last European Masters, they had a really good roster, like you said, with Tasteless coming in. Who are we looking at on this roster that could perform? Let's put Tasteless to the side, because he's not actually on the roster right now. Who on this roster should we really keep an eye on?
Okay, so still, Nicola is still a good functional AD carry. He's nowhere near the peaks that we did see him achieve last year or the peaks that he famously had with ClickTech, but he's still pretty good, and we can't necessarily put it all on him given that the bot lane has gone through significant changes. Now, Stefan, who he praised as a jungler last year, is now actually in the support role for that team. Someone who is going from strength to strength there right now, though, is actually Kex. Kex has actually had some really strong performances yesterday. And the issue that they have had is playing around the pressure that he's able to create. Even though he's had very strong performances in laning phase, they are yet to actually translate that into map-wide control later on. And generally, teams are able to make comebacks because they are kind of ignoring this pressure point that they should be able to play around the map with. So we'd be looking at Kex getting those advantages, but also at the rest of the team actually playing properly around those advantages. And also Kex himself. Like yesterday, he had a 40 CS lead versus Kled. And yet what ended up happening was that Kled still getting first on every grouping because they never make sure to unlock their Renekton before they go for a neutral objective on the other side of the map. And Kled is brilliant at collapsing. So a lot of teams are going to look at them as a team that like maybe they get significant advantages early, but so long as we have a really good composition when it comes to turning and collapsing, we're probably still going to be able to win out because they're not actually that good at playing with their map tempo. And this is why losing those kinds of map advantages from certain players is such an issue for them, and why I really do favor Super.
And was there anything that you saw from his Ace of Strong Elite yesterday that you thought, well, okay, there is a shining hope there? They're 0-2, obviously, but was there anything that you feel they did do well? You know, maybe apart from Kex, anything else that you felt they did well?
Right, so we already touched on Kex and how he kind of commands resources, as you mentioned, but think about the fact that you have Kashtilan, who was such a hyped mid lane prospect for so long. Of course, he did play in Poland for quite some time. He is, of course, Polish. Decided, hey, maybe this full-time esports thing isn't actually for me. Gonna focus on my education, and I think I can still be a top-tier mid laner in one of these more developing EU Masters qualifying regions. And that's exactly what he's been. He's been top-tier in the Czech region as a whole, and his reputation from the past couple of years has carried on, and he's played absolutely fine. He's played pretty solidly, but he does tend to disrespect a lot of the competition here on the international stage so far. Just in the previous day, we've seen him go for flash all-ins on Rise when the minion wave was not in a position to get the bounces on the spell flux, and when the Q got soaked by something or another. It just... reads that he's making don't make sense when you look at it from a bird's eye view, but in the moment you can imagine that he's thinking, all right, if I'm in the Czech league domestically, this mid laner is clearly a step below me. I can just style on him, walk away with it, and carry it home. But against legitimate competition, I not only have my concerns for these players individually, because here they're just good, they're not insanely good anymore, but also as a whole, they've only played together for 4 days with this lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an interesting story, actually, because they said that they were specifically looking to refresh the honeymoon period. And a veteran provides a unique insight here as being an ex-coach and you know, has been doing a lot of high-level coaching. What is a honeymoon period? Does that exist? Is that something that you want to achieve?
Oh, no, 100%.
Before going into a major? Yeah.
I mean, mental resets do actually help a lot as a team, so long as you already have the fundamentals down. And so the worry is that if you are going to do this, that you don't get rid of players that may have actually contributed to those fundamentals in the first place. So really strong honeymoon periods have been achieved by, for example, way back in the day when Fnatic switched out their jungler Amazing for Broxer and switched out their coach Nico for their manager at the time. They ended up with a honeymoon period where the people who were calling the shots in that team had remained static throughout that. That's why it worked so well. But if you're going to do such a massive shuffle, there isn't really the team that you are trying to get like a mental reset on actually existing anymore. It's kind of like is the broom still a broom once you've replaced the brush and you've replaced the handle? You've basically got a new broom at this point, right? And you still have to bash it in. So I can see the intention. As far as I know, their initial plan was kind of scuffed because I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I do believe that Speedy was not supposed to count as an import, so to speak, and then he ended up counting as one, so they had to do more changes than they initially wanted to. So it probably wasn't their intention to have all of this, but you may as well just take Tasteless back at that point, because Stefan has looked a bit lost in the role, and he was previously a very talented jungler, so it's a bit of a shame to see him have to look so lost on the map right now.
So we're about 2 minutes away from our pick and ban phase here for between Aces and Super. Okay, let's dial in on this particular sort of micro matchups then. What are we expecting from Jakey? What does Jakey do to win this particular game then in the early game here, veteran? I mean, what are we looking at from this jungler to actually shut down Aces? Is it merely just get Kex behind, make sure he can't get the resources that he needs? Is that the way that you undo Aces from what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the way that I would expect a player like Jakey to play this out would be to just map split straight for top side with a favorable jungle matchup. They'll either try to give him counter pick or they'll early rotate something like Jarvan, if they believe that they will get the strong favorable matchup by doing that. But you will always generally have level 2 advantage with that kind of champion. And if they do that, then yeah, probably a map split for top side is something I could see coming out from them. It will kind of depend on draft, because whatever jungle matchup is, I assume Jakey is going to play it as aggressively as possible, and they will pick around that. He's just very, very, very good at playing that matchup out, and at the same time, not foregoing his laners. He does it more aggressively than most. So that would be what I would expect.
Ibris, we're about 1 minute away from draft. Has there been anything that you've noticed that these guys have lent on in the draft phase? Anything that you have kind of been, I guess, comfortable compositions to either team from what you've seen?
Yeah, so for Asus in particular, I want to touch on the fact that they are quite reliant on conditional engage tools. And you usually think of Sejuani Thresh as being like a reliable, let me start this fight off for us kind of composition. That would be the case if this jungler and support could hit a skill shot between them. So many times we saw in their game versus, I think, Gamer Legion and in Vipers Inc., just so many things going wide. And it's also, even when on set, you had Stefan just going in by himself, doing his own thing, just split off from the rest of the team. And A, you need to get your guaranteed engage down if you want to start taking fights on your own circumstances. And B, you need to be on the same page.
Right, we are about to go to a very short break while we get set up for this draft phase. So I'm going to kick it over, and when we're back, our casters will be taking you through that draft and into the first game. See you soon.
My name is Stanley Greyheart Barker. I'm joined by the wonderful man that is Maurits Chronicler Musen. That's you, Maurits.
Sorry, I know. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a delay, but I can hear you now. And that's the most important part. And I'm really excited to take a look at the games that we're going to have here today. Specifically because this is two teams that I haven't casted before.
Well, we have got ourselves a real fire match between Asuba and Asus. Currently, these two teams standing at 2-1 and 1-2 respectively in their group, both in with a chance of securing the second slot into the knockout phase. This is going to be such a crucial game for both these teams.
It is, and I hope we can get into the game ASAP because I think both teams have kind of had a, not necessarily rough, but like, as you mentioned before, this is a really key match that they need to take if they really want to have a shot at like having a good chance making out of groups. Because what you want to avoid is you want a situation in which you have matches that you need to win 100% that are unfavored, and losing here would, for both these teams, means that the rest of the journey is going to be a lot harder.
I mean, massively harder. We're still with half of the games of this round robin stage to be played. So 3 games played, 3 still to go. There is not a single team that is out. However, Gamer Legion with that 3-0 record and Viper with that 0-3 record, respectively, they look very likely to proceed to the next round and very unlikely to, even though they could turn their fortunes round.
As you're saying, I think that if we look at the bottom team, Vipers, there is technically still a way, but they have to beat Gamer Legion. That's probably not going to happen, as Gamer Legion is the team that, I mean, that's talked about a little bit as well, but I think we still have some time before we go into Champ Select so we can actually do this. I think that if we look at what we seen from Gamer Legion thus far, like, they are the only team, unlike a team like NAD, a team like Kick, that have dropped wins where they weren't expected to, that just look unbeatable. Like, they look incredibly strong. No one has really been able to touch them. So Vipers in getting a win against them is not really likely. And that means that both Asuba and Aces really, really badly want to take this win. This might actually be, in my opinion, the hardest or the most important game for them, because Vipers have looked so shaky that going into that match, you're going to be pretty confident. And if you get a good win here, then a lot of the pressure is going to be off your shoulders.
Yeah, exactly that. I think both these teams will probably be expecting to go out and to beat Viper. Realistically, they're probably both expecting to lose to Gamer Legion as well. So very easily, this game could decide whether or not they proceed. So for instance, if Asus were to win this one and those other results were to go as you just described them, Chronicler, both these teams would end 3-3 with Gamer Legion topping the group and these two teams playing off for second place.
And something important to note is that we are having, not rather we, but there's been some issues. I think it's with Champ Select, might be like something client-wise. So we're going to have a little bit more time before we actually get into this match, which is unfortunate because I'm really curious to see what we were going to see out of Pick and Ban, considering that the matches that we've seen from both of these teams thus far have been pretty slugfesty, at least the ones that I've casted. And that kind of gives me the impression that this might be a really fun game to start the day off with as well, because, you know, we want to see action. I mean, you specifically, because you're the one who fired on that. But I know, you know, I don't have a distaste for Bloodshot when it comes to League of Legends. So a lot of action in the early game is something that I'd love to see. Whether or not that's actually going to be the case, though, remains to be seen, because as mentioned previously, we are having some issues, or generally there are some issues with getting into Champ Select. So I'm going to take our time, but we should be fine, hopefully getting into game soon.
We, of course, will bring that game just as quickly as we can. I think you're absolutely right. I expect to see quite a few early game champions, especially on Kex, the top laner for Asus. A lot of the pressure that is developed on the map for Rocket League comes out of this top laner. I expect to see him start playing something maybe along the lines of the Renekton or something like that. We'll see as Champ Select happens. However, with that, still a little way away, we can talk about what's going on. If this is our first game for the stream today for the EU Masters play-ins. We are playing on the live patch 10.7 with Fiddlesticks disabled. Wukong is in an exceptionally powerful place. That being said, of all the games we had of Wukong the other day, we saw him banned a couple of times, we saw him played a couple of times, both times quite underwhelming.
Yeah, I think Wukong is one that is indeed very strong, but teams need to be able to play him well. And we saw in the Sector 1 match where they played the Wukong, that did not go well at all. Wukong lost early on pretty heavily to Maokai, and then once you're behind, in a matchup like that, you're not going to be able to really do anything anymore. So we've seen some priority on the Wukong. We've seen some bans come out because teams still don't really want to deal with it because the secondary activation, the ultimate, is a huge bother to deal with. But I feel like this might be a situation we saw with Worlds 2019, where initially everyone is trying to play Echo Jungle, and then they collectively realize, like, wait a minute, this isn't actually good. Maybe we shouldn't do this anymore. And I think it's too early to say that with Wukong, but we have seen the meta develop very quickly over the course of the tournament. 10.7 is a very new patch. There hasn't been that much competitive play on it, meaning that you are going to see kind of a lag or like a development within this tournament. And playing specifically, I think already exhibits that, and I expected to see that continue as we go into the main event.
So stepping away from the champions, now looking a little bit at the format of this fantastic event. Of course, everybody wants to make it to the main stage of EU Masters coming very shortly. To do that, they've got to find their way, first of all, out of the group stage. And these groups have been drawn completely at random. There are no seedings. There are no, this is your best team in the group, this is your worst team in the group. It was all out of a hat. The only rule being you couldn't be drawn with a team from the same region.
And I think that's a really important one. I say this as a Benelux caster, because if my two teams would have ended up in the same group, I would have been very sad. And it looks like we're just getting some intel that the game is actually postponed till 7 due to some issues with the tournament realm. So yesterday, Stan, we tried to cast and that didn't work. And then it was, with some issues on your end. And now it feels like the universe is transpiring to keep us scared yet again, because now apparently there's been collective issues with the tournament realm. So we're not going to be able to bring you a game anytime soon, unfortunately.
Well, this happens every time Cronny Heart gets together. Technical difficulties and us. Name a better duo. We will try and bring you this game or another game from the EU Masters just as soon as we are able to. But for now, we are cutting to a small break. We hope to catch you soon.
the end. It's all good. What's up? All right, we are back, boys. What's up? Your boy here, Scoundrel's not here. Why he's abandoned you, all right? But I, the one and only veteran, will not abandon you. And also this random, say hi.
Thanks, man. Yeah, hey, it's me, Ibris, good friend, a veteran, a long-time acquaintances. Maybe the look he's given.
Continue.
What he gives me, but all right. Yeah. So we're about to head into game, but well, I'd say about to head into game. Well, we don't really know what that means because hey, we get a pause every now and again. Servers are like,
Servers are like this.
Super.
Valorant just came out. Can't really talk about Valorant too much, except it is delaying us getting into Isuba, i.e. getting into the next iteration of the Jakey show, as I talk about it. But you are pretty high on another person in Isuba's lineup, right? Random. I do remember Random being really good in EU Masters last year. He's definitely a strong point for them. Tell me what you love about Random as a player.
So I like the fact that he's quite not only aggressive but also just facilitating, because we talked about Jakey and how he just likes to play the 1v1 kind of, not only the 1v1, but he splits map, and he also likes the winning jungle matchups, because, hey, who the hell doesn't like winning jungle matchups?
And he can actually play them out as well. It's a bit unique in that sense.
I just like the fact that Random not only secures prio for him to play around, but also it just feels like Jakey has this guy, not in his back pocket per se, but has a lot of reliability stemming from the mid lane. And I think that the difference between Random and a lot of the other mids and lanes that we're having our eyes on is a lack of volatility. He has similar highs, but a lot lower lows relative to some of the others in the pool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a concept we talk about on my stream a lot, twitch.tv/veteraneu, where a jungler can only really be as good as his laners allow him to be. Like, say that you have a really intricate path in mind. Say you do want to go for like a split map towards top side in this game, for example, but then Kex just solo kills the enemy top laner at level 2. You can't do that option anymore, but you already were moving towards doing that. So now you're delayed on what your backup option would be if you're going to play around bot side of the map now, say if you're on the full clear, you're now delayed on that, so you're effectively behind in jungle because of a decision you've been making beforehand. If you have some sort of core that you can always rely on, like you say Random is, and we can see from Random's champion pool as well, lots of mages, lots of easy priority, easy to like survive in lane with picks that he has there, then that would enable Jakey to be able to do his thing, right? That's actually very, very invaluable. Like, you are kind of capped, which is why we don't generally see a lot of the more hyped up junglers outright win. Shadow, who's doing really well in LEC right now, didn't win EU Masters. He didn't even make it out of the semi-finals. He didn't even take a game in the semi-finals because you can be as good a jungler as you want, but if your laners don't allow you to perform like you want to, it's very, very difficult to show up in at least an obvious fashion.
Kind of funny to speak about Shadow, actually, because his former mid laner from that Mouse lineup is on Gamer Legion now, who are, of course, first place team in this night. A little bit coin flippy still, but most of the time landing face up. And yeah, I'm still pretty hyped to see how him and Rabble, the new jungler by his side, actually do develop. Because I was talking to their coach, Delivery Panda, and he said, look, we've got 3 veterans secured, and we want them to be the guiding light for this mid-jungle duo that I genuinely believe to be the next big thing.
Oh, there's only one veteran, but I can see why they would be hyped to have so much experience on their team. That being said, typically we have seen the less experienced players, the players people counted out, the players that maybe hadn't gotten so many good relations, so much good PR, actually standing out. Is there anyone like that is like coming in new that you can see in this group that you're really interested in?
I mean, in this group in particular, you have, well, the newest face possible to talk about would be the new jungler of Asus, ROG, who, well, Speedy, he's fine. He's not, I'm hesitant to decide if he's necessarily worth the import slot, but the thing about Group A that intrigues me the most is that it's made up of a lot of players that are maybe in the twilight years of their careers, but they're making a resurgence. You have your Hyanans, even your Kex, who was of course on LDLC with Crowny back in the day. You even have like, you had 3/5 of that initial Click Tech roster from the first EU Masters. Now you have 2/5 of it, plus Kex, who we've just mentioned. And yeah, Group A actually a bit of an enigma in that regard, where you have a healthy mix of not only upcoming talent, but players entering a resurgence that we didn't really expect them to be able to, swing into.
All right, so are we expecting? Because I'm at least expecting it. eSuper and Gamer Legion to be making out of Group A and to be contesting against the other teams.
Yeah, so the thing about these groups is that top 2 of Group A will guaranteed face against top 2 of Group B. And Group B is the group of life, as we mentioned, with Raccoon actually playing a little bit cleaner than we maybe anticipated. So rather than necessarily strictly thinking about those 2 teams making it out right away, even though it is incredibly relevant with this next game being very, very telling of that. But if eSuper are the ones to make it out, I know you've looked a lot at Raccoon, because it's presumably going to be Raccoon taking Group B first seed. How do you think about eSuper matching up against Raccoon for that guaranteed spot in the main event of EU Masters?
I actually don't see it going well for Raccoon. And I'll tell you why, because then you could never stop me telling you why anyway. Because Raccoon, whereas they are very good at playing as 5, they're very good at doing this because most junglers will not play out specific jungle matchups properly and shut down that particular aspect. What Raccoon done is very, very, very good if you're against a very heavy ganking jungler. And whereas I'm not saying Jakey doesn't gank, I am saying Jakey recognizes when that's not the primary move that he can be making at that point. And so just because Raccoon are able to juggle waves properly and are able to not give an opening for the enemy jungler to be able to make a play on a specific lane, what Jakey will do, if matchup allows for it, will play around the specific timings relative to the camps that you're clearing and relative to the only times that they can be to find windows against you and shut you down first and take you out of the map first. So I actually think it's going to be a very, very, very difficult game for Ploxy in particular versus eSuper, and that will end up messing up a lot of the juggling that they're normally able to do. Because if you have someone who's very strong at counter juggling, you can throw them off. You can think of this similar to last year's Origin. If Cold was thrown off in that sense, then a lot of Origin's early game scenarios would collapse. So some of these really early game plays that, like maybe if G2 saw you overstep over a ward that was in the middle of their jungle and they TP their AD carry, and then you'll be out of step for the rest of the game and it will look a lot closer, right? That's the kind of thing you do versus Raccoon.
Yeah, okay, absolutely agree with that. And actually, on that note, Ploxy is the shot caller of this roster, and we credited... we recognized that they had a lot of good decision-making, especially in those early to mid stages of the game, where it came to splitting the map, where it came to seeding certain parts of it in order to establish more pressure on another side of things and, just trade upwards in that regard. And I think that if you do kind of knock him out of sorts, if you put that shot caller behind, I mean, there's a reason why not many people were too high on Raccoon heading into the PG playoffs, and there's a reason why we're all super surprised that they are coming out the gate swinging this EU Masters.
Yeah. It doesn't even really matter to me if he is like a shot calling presence or not. It's just that the function of the jungler when you're juggling waves about like that is that he is essentially the juggler. Say that your bot wave is shoving in, you need jungler on that side so that he can escort the wave in so that you can get it safe on that side. If you get the jungler before he's able to do that, bot lane is actually just gankable now, rather than just on a bad wave. It's just straight gankable because enemy jungler can't match because he's off the map. And now they get ganked, their wave gets thrown completely out of sync. You're now probably having to save 2 sides of the map at once, and you can't do that, right? So like I think irrespective of all of that stuff, I think it's just a very good kind of game style coming in from eSuper versus Raccoon. I think when it comes to Gamer Legion, though, that's a bit more of an interesting one to talk about because even though they have won every game, right, it's not like they've looked completely invincible, right? Yeah. Particularly when we look towards the top side. And we've already talked about like top laners in like their particular group of Kex. Is there anyone that we're looking at or any team that you're looking at stylistically that could really take the game to them that they may even face in the next stage?
So the thing about Gamer Legion is, as you mentioned, they have phones who are a little bit hit or miss. He's been around the scene for ages. He was the premier German scene top laner for about 2-3 years, but that was a solid 5 years ago. Again, one of these veterans that we mentioned being in the twilight years of his career, but not quite on that resurgence level that some of the others have been. And Gamer Legion, they have the clean shot calling to transition them into the mid to late game. But the issue is that they do tend to seed a lot in the early game. You've seen phones get solo killed, actually by the Nordic representatives of Vipers Inc. That was kind of bad, if I'm honest, for want of a better word. That was just not optimal, let me tell you that.
any team looked good against Vipers Inc. though. Let's be real.
The thing is, Vipers Inc. They had everyone thought they were a late game team, and they took it to Gamer Legion from 1 minute to 15 minutes, then just kind of rolled over and died once they got into their stride. They almost had the comeback versus Isuba. They love their 50-minute games, and they love their backs and forth.
I mean, they love their scaling champions for sure, right? Like, you just take a cursory look at their history, and it's full of Zillion, Karthus, Ziggs, Kassadin. What is this psychopathic team, to be honest?
Yeah. Actually thinking of Gamer Legion again, though, because you said who are they going to match up against, and that, do you think it'll be Intrepid Fox? I'm not entirely sold on Intrepid Fox making it out as the second seed of this group.
I mean, if Intrepid Fox do get out, I'd actually be really interested in that, because Arpen is actually very punishing for them, and Delito has had some really phenomenal games so far. Obviously, they haven't won every single game. They do have a loss on the board to Raccoon, and Raccoon did actually opt into a map split that shut down Apen pretty well. But if he's allowed to go ham, and if he does play with his top side, maybe we could see one of Gamer Legion's strengths actually being taken there. I think they may be able to do it. I actually really like their solo laners. And the thing with Knight is that even when he was on Mouse Sports, I wasn't particularly high on him. I wouldn't necessarily call him coin flip. It's just that there's a very, very, very specific set of champions that they could rely on him on, and there's a very specific way that they played with him. He was essentially a utility champion. That Mouse lineup was quite unique for using their carry players as essentially utility champions, with Shadow as the real carry. And when Knight was not on that, it was very obvious that he has pretty big laning flaws. So Punisher could actually look very strong against them. We've already seen IFG just straight up win through solid solo laners and solid split pushing. They are very happy to opt into 1-3-1 and play heavily around their laners if they can. And their laners, they don't look bad at all. Punisher obviously has a large following right now, so I'm not just saying that for the clout. I'd really like to point out the Lito in particular, because he's played like both kinds of styles right now to varying degrees of success, but both actually pretty successful right now.
Yeah, Punisher and Alpen in particular, both very, very well renowned in high elo solo queue for being just aggressive in your face whenever you give them the opportunity to be so. Alpen in particular, just in your jungle, straight up 24/7. If you get him an advantageous matchup, he will punish. And again, this is the kind of parallel that we were drawing between Jakey and who are we gonna think about? Jakey in particular is a good example of it, where they play for the jungle matchup, where they know how to push with the lead that they have.
Yep.
And I think that unique, it's not necessarily unique because like 2 or 3 players actually have it in the playing stage, but that rare trait of having junglers that not only know how to play around their lanes, but also know how to, fully extend
play
their
around
role.
the specific timings of their matchups as well.
Exactly.
So, it's a pretty big deal, and Jakey can juggle both, and I think Arpen can juggle both, but the difference between Jakey and Arpen is that if Arpen is thrown off,
you said Knight wasn't coin flip. Arpen definitely is coin flip.
Arpen has a very good idea of how to play out the game clearly from draft, but if he's thrown off of that, his reactions to the changing map state aren't very good. Like, he's not exactly an intuitive player. It's what I've seen from him so far. Hopefully you can prove me wrong. But as a result, we'd be looking to see what Rabble can do against him, right? What maybe Rabble and Wisdom can do against him, and if they can throw him off. Obviously, then they would have to play away from top side of the map to do that, which may just open up Arpen to the game plan that Intrepid Fox we should have versus Gamer Legion. But this is the kind of way that you can really throw off their early game. And if you do throw off their early game, then maybe you can match them in mid to late game. If it gets to mid to late game and Arpen hasn't been thrown off yet, I actually be very interested to see what an IFG 1-3-1 looks like versus Gamer Legion. I'd be very interested in seeing that, because maybe they can pull it off.
Yeah, I think both mid laners defaulting to the Cassiopeia pick as well, and you saw just how well you saw the Aurelia come out from Intrepid Fox actually there to counter things out in that regard. I'm definitely sold on the discrepancies between the junglers and how similar they actually can be in some regards as well. You have the mid laners with the hard carry mentality versus the utility pools. Thinking about the side lanes though, because we talked about top lane, we talked about how Phones is a little bit suspect at times, but Hyun and Wisdom have looked like the best bot lane in all of the Prime League, and of course Prime League being considered to be the I would actually consider them best bot lane in Prime League now for the latter half of
not even close. Neon came back and is literally like a tier above absolutely everyone. And obviously that's enabled Sir Nukes a lot to look a lot better than he's normally looked. So I can obviously put a lot of this.
That's also better for him.
That's also true. Yeah. But Neon's looked so much better than every other bot laner to such a dramatic extent. In fact, I'm not even sure I'd put Hyanan and Wisdom over Malz's bot lane, and Malz's bot lane has some very obvious issues. Hyanan himself is not that strong a laner. He just, quite frankly, is not that strong a laner right now at all. Wisdom gets very inconsistent when he gets to mid game, but obviously Sprattle's been having a similar issue. And Schalke are just altogether a better put together team. So Sir Nukeslot will look a lot better in mid game than most others. But that being said, Sir Nukeslot moves along with the team plan properly, right? And I can't really say the same thing for Wisdom every single time. Right, I would far from call them the best bot lane in Prime. I think they were a major part of why they were able to go heavily through playoffs. But let's not forget how the rest of the season for Gamer Legion looked. Yeah, they were lucky to be in playoffs in the first place, all right? And then honestly, for them to be here, no one really expected that. I expected AHG to be here. I would even expect Euronics to be here before they get here. Really sorry for Shinkworth, probably the best jungler that isn't at EU Masters in any way, shape, or form. But the rest of the roster wasn't really all that, right? But Gamer Legion are kind of lucky to be in that sense, which is why I feel like there's a very there is a light that even though they're looking quite good right now, right, all their games haven't just been one-sided stomps, and maybe other teams and plans can actually take the game to them.
Yeah, I absolutely would appreciate that, but I think Gamer Legion suffer from like a Mouse-like kind of scenario here, where if you see the Ziggs, it's almost guaranteed to be bot lane. If you see the Syndra, it's about 80% guaranteed to be bot lane.
Yeah.
At the same time, I do like these more wave clear centric control magey picks do open up opportunities for some early roams for Wisdom. But the issue is what?
Yeah, I mean they do after first item. They do after first item for sure, but for example, in early levels, if you're a control mage versus Aphelios versus Kalista versus Ezreal, there's no way that you can win trades early on that because you're so cooldown focused. And if you have to burn cooldowns on them, you're not burning cooldowns on the wave, right?
Speaking of AD carries, what do you think of Hyanan defaulting to Kaisar just most of the time when Aphelios is taken out? He just goes for that when they need some AD in their composition.
Yeah, I mean, I think he does that primarily for wave control. Like when I think Hyanan, the champion I actually think the most was Sivir, for anyone who remembers his Season 5 Sivir. Yeah, Season 5 HUK. He was a massive Sivir player, and he's generally trying to like get priority for his support when he was doing that at the time. Right now, the way that I more interpret it is that Kai'Sa is kind of one of these modifier bot lanes, not to the same extent as like a Kalista or Draven is, but when we have a Kai'Sa on the map, it's very easy for her to acquire super early wave control, and then you can start talking about, unlocking the map for Wisdom. I think after first item, you can do that with Syndra as well, and that's one thing that it can do better than almost any other champion, because you have way more waves that you can extend as a support on bot lane if you're a Syndra, if you have a Syndra or a Cassie or something like this, because of how efficient they are at clearing the wave after first item, which effectively makes them undiveable. Syndra's always been like that in mid to late game anyway, and she's still like that now after first back. So yeah, I do agree with you. It's just not from minute one, right? And thinking about super early priorities is something we do want to think about when it comes to a matchup versus either eSuber or Intrepid Fox Gaming, because these are two teams that can actually do a lot if you give them definite points of early, like level 1 to 3 priority, and that's not necessarily something Syndra is going to give you.
Hey guys, I'm back. By the way, I have returned from the depths of the kitchen. Guys, give me a little TLDR of what's been going on since. What have we been discussing? Where are we heading? Like almost like a very philosophical question on
So for knockout brackets, we established that the groups are actually locked. So it's A versus B and C versus D. So Group A, Seed 1 will go against Group B, Seed 2, and so on, basically. So pretty firm established in who's probably going to go up against who, and that's why this next game is pretty influential, because it will see who will be the one to challenge Raccoon later in the tournament, which I believe will be Thursday for that best of 3. So yeah, very, very telling as to just how this will pan out after.
I love that name, by the way. I love the name Raccoon. I just want to say, like,
Oh,
whoever came up with that name, I love it. I really do. And the logo, mwah, I love it. I love everything about it.
The logo Raccoon by any chance?
Even if you were like 0-3, I'd
Jersey.
support you just by this alone. Yeah, just for this alone. Love it. Absolutely love it.
I want to extrapolate from play-ins now. I want to extrapolate a little bit because obviously the end goal for all of these teams is to make it to the group stages. That the end goal is to join the upper echelon of European talent in the European Masters group stages. Any of these, let's discount Mad Lions and Gamer Legion because they come from regions that have had competition of that level, throughout the regular split. Do any of these teams stand a hope in hell if they make it to the group stages?
That's the question, right? Because a lot of the strength of Vsuba does come through their jungle, but I'm not so sure about top and bot being able to carry through versus those group stage games, in which case Jakey's options become a lot more limited. What Intrepid Fox Gamer are doing well right now also relies on a similar level of parity between their laners, which may not continue if they get into the, not Intrepid Fox, I mean Raccoon, which may not continue to get towards the group stages. As a result of that, even though I think Raccoon are the standout in Group B right now, I think Intrepid Fox Gaming are more likely to do well if they were to go into the group stage from Group B, even if I think Raccoon are actually favoured against them right now, because I don't think the discrepancy is big enough between Intrepid Fox Gaming and Raccoon that Raccoon can't get away with what they're getting away with right now, which is just good macro gameplay. But I think Intrepid Fox laners are good enough that they can potentially match up with some of the best in the group stage, and not instantly fall flat on their face, but the same is not necessarily true for Raccoon. Right? So if we look at Group C, you have to think if Alois was ever going to shine, it has to be now, right? And they've been putting him a lot on the Gangplank, which is a ridiculously hard carry champion. Spike's literally just coming out the A, and he has been performing with it, but the team as a whole has also dramatically struggled with understanding like reset timings so that they can get on the map first and get on these objectives and capitalize off of the winning side lane. Every time that they have a map-based lead, they don't even seem to recognize that yet. So whereas they may even be able to get leads off of the strength of Alois when we get to later stages of the game, and you know what, Chapapi, I do think he could maybe be able to stand up to some of the mid laners. If they can't capitalize on it properly, I don't really see that much of a chance for them. But that's something that's easier to fix than just having fundamentally bad laners, right? So you could say there's a chance for Diffuse Kids in Group C.
Yeah, you said it yourself there, where this GP that they default onto for Alois has a lot of spikes throughout the game. It's the issue that Diffuse Kids as a whole don't really know what to do with those spikes when they have them. Thinking about Diffuse Kids in particular, because Benelux stream, during the regular season and actually during playoffs, you were looking at Alois, but you're also looking at the reason why they have stopped playing strictly through top lane. And that's because they added Goose to the team. And Goose is hyped up as being an AD carry that can actually butt heads with a lot of the other competition from the major regions as well. And I'm not huge on him, but I actually think that he's fairly hefty himself.
I think actually from whenever I've seen Diffuse Kids, and obviously we've seen them in the European Masters a significant amount in the past, I've always looked mid-top and said, okay, Chapapi, like when he pops off, like when Chapapi brings out the Ari, he can actually, go toe-to-toe in certain matchups. And, he has a really, really good champion pool aside from that. And obviously we talk about Alois, he's a fantastic player, but I always thought the bot side of Diffuse Kids was weak. Like
that's why they changed it in the off-season, but that's why they are also tripping up over themselves here now, because it's a new dynamic that they've added, and it's why they struggled so much during the regular season, and it's why we're kind of hesitant to have them as a shoe-in for making a splash in the potential knockout bracket.
I actually do like Nightmares. I do have to say, I actually do like Nightmares' performances so far. There's been a lot of glimpses of the kind of support jungle things that we do like to see if we're going to talk about the higher levels of EU Masters. And if they can just get reset timings down, I think that they actually have genuine chances of running away with a place in groups. But I haven't seen any of that yet. The potential is there, though. I don't think the bot lane thing has necessarily just entirely thrown them off. I do think that there is a positive that has been added there from Nightmares. I think Group D has a lot of very interesting picks, though. Like Sector 1 is a team that I was incredibly impressed by. They had a very nuanced understanding of map groupings. So, for example, yesterday, I believe it wasn't versus Kick, I believe it was versus WLG maybe, where they started a fight around bot side, and it was Aatrox versus Set on top side, but they had TP disadvantage while engaging this fight on bot side, but they simply had Aatrox start an unfavorable trade top side, so the Set could never use his TP advantage to move down in towards the bot side of the map. That's actually a very nuanced thing when it comes to map-based groupings and team-based decisions. Every decision these guys make, they do actually make together. I do think on an individual talent level, though, they are somewhat lacking. Like the strongest player that they have there by far is Savior from the CIS region, in fact. But I'm not, just having a really strong support is not necessarily enough if your laners will just collapse, which could be a shame. But I think they are good enough to come out of this group. The group looks very close right now, but I think WLG look incredibly inconsistent on those kind of similar things. Double Aim looks to be doing a lot of stuff alone on that team right now. As a result, a lot of it's just not working, right? Like
hasn't that just been Double Aim in his entire career, though? Like,
that does sound like Double Aim's entire career, yeah. But as a result, WLG is incredibly inconsistent as a team. So I would expect Sector 1 to actually come out on top of them, even if we see a lot of really nice names on the side of WLG. Like everyone remembers CosQ, Hungry Pandas being here a lot. Yeah. And Icebreaker has had some really good performances as well. It's just you can't have like one or two good performances. You need many good performances to get out of the group stage here, and I don't think they're going to consistently be able to do that versus teams that are well put together like Sector 1 and Kick, who are coming back in on form. Ice Beast has had a much better split this year in the Polish league than he did last year, and Schlaton is actually showing significant improvement.
Definitely Schlaton hype train for me, and for a lot of other players. Just thinking about Schlaton, he's really, really solid, and a lot of their success was through him. The thing about Kick, though, is there was a long-running meme where Matislav doesn't really leave lane. The thing is, he does a little bit. It's just, as a region as a whole, symptomatic of the Ultraliga is the fact that the mid laners like these extended lane phases, like the Azir Corki more than anywhere else, and they like just chill back. And Kick have remedied that by bringing fights to the mid lane or through the mid lane to try and, actually make the action happen there. But if there ever was, like, an indication that someone was allergic to roaming, I think you just have to watch some of these games play out.
Yeah, I always remember Matislav being very lane focused when we saw him in the previous European Masters. Even when he played Zoe, when you had that roaming. I mean, obviously Matislav and Zoe, it's synonymous with each other, but when he plays Zoe, he doesn't always roam maybe as much as some of the other mid laners out there. He's definitely very much like, I shove my lane, I take my turret, that type of thing. Just to keep you up to date, guys, I have been trying to keep up with the messages about the tournament realm. We are still waiting on a fix for the tournament realm right now. All games are scheduled to start in around 15 minutes. Whether that will be the case or not, we do not know. We are waiting for a tournament realm fix at the moment. So yes, we will keep you updated as much as we can. We are waiting for Riot to establish a emergency patch to the tournament round to make sure that we can get the people in game. All spectators are being kicked out. A lot of the players being kicked out right now. So we just haven't quite got the means to get these games to go ahead. But we will just be pushing the schedule back by an hour for the time being until we can get a hold of what is actually going on the tournament realm right now. But obviously, as we go, we've basically got podcasts with Veteran and Ibris carrying me forward. So that's always a nice thing to listen to for the time as we pass it by. You guys have kind of talked a little bit about each of the individual groups and what you sort of expecting from them. Gamer Legion. And I kind of want to talk about this because this is a really funny story, and not funny story. It's a nice story, I guess.
All right.
If Veta remembers who won the last European Masters and where they came from in the tournament to win the last European Masters,
True.
It was Berlin International Gaming. They came from the play-ins. Yep. They were the worst the worst dark region seed technically at that point in terms of numbering, and they actually came out and won. And I know veterans say, but they were the best team, obviously. But yeah, they numbers wise in terms of their performance in the split, they didn't do as well as the other dark region teams in the competition. But they came from the play-ins. They came through that early gauntlet. They then crushed everybody, and they ended up winning the whole thing. And then Kazi now has just beaten G2. So it was quite a meteoric rise for that team as a whole. But Gamer Legion, I want to now look at the third seed from the dark region again. They're 3-0 in the group stages. They're looking pretty slick. Do we think that there could be, or is there a potential for a repeat for Big there, or do they just not have the same kind of talent?
So I have them on paper as maybe top 4 in the entire tournament, but probably going to bomb out in top 8. Yeah, probably top 8 of the entire tournament. Main event, Veteran raised an eyebrow when I said top 4, so gonna step back on that one.
I thought he raised an eyebrow at top 8, to be fair.
Well, see how that pans out, depending on how the LFL shows up this time around. But you can only have so many Spanish teams. Then again, his opinions of the Spanish league not too high either. Sorry if the Twitter brigade comes after you on that one. I've just thrown you under, but at least you didn't say anything bad about FTW. So
don't ever say anything about FTW. Trust me, I know that.
Fuck FTW.
Trust me, I had 2 years of pain from one guy on Reddit who used to just comment saying this guy is so biased against FTW. The Portuguese scene hates him, and I was like, I don't remember saying anything bad about FTW. But anyway, let's digress and move back onto Gamer Legion.
Yeah, so
this is obviously Dark Region third team.
Yeah, we were talking about them before about how they have like 2.5 fairly consistent experienced talents. They have one semi-inconsistent experienced talent too in the top lane, as Veteran loves to point out. But the mid-jungle volatility is what really makes me think that this team can either make a splash or fall flat on its face. It's fun to watch, it's fun to experience, and I think that we're not going to see them showcase the highest highs they're capable of during play-ins. But at the same time, I don't exactly expect them to breeze through once the main event does roll around.
What do you think, Veteran?
I don't think there's the kind of individual talent that we saw on Berlin International Gaming that made them essentially a shoo-in for the top spot there. Berlin International Gaming were the only team that had individual talent that was enough to shut down some of the map-based plays of their contenders. Like, I'm looking at LDLC, right? The only reason that I was predicting big back at that tournament was because they had a bot lane that would not allow Steelback to just take over the map and take over the entire game. I don't see any position of strength like that on the side of Gamer Legion. I disagree with the characterization of Neon and Wisdom as being like the best bot lane in Prime League. I think Neon just poops all over them, and I even think Miles' bot lane is able to take the fight to them as well. Any map advantages they're intending to get from that, and Wisdom is not exactly a steelback. He's good, but he's not exactly a steelback. Are null and void if they can't actually get their 2v2 lane up. So there's a hard cap there. Knight has never been that sort of lane dominant player either, and Phones isn't even that lane dominant player at this stage of the play-ins. We can already see areas that other teams would be looking to attack. We've discussed how Isuba, how Vakuno, and Intrepid Fox Gaming are actually placed to try to take advantage of topside 2v2. We need to see Rabble step up massively if he wants to do this, but historically, junglers have not been able to do this if the laners aren't able to keep up. Looking at Shadow, for example, who also just beat G2, but couldn't beat Berlin International Gaming, right? But, you know, if you can't beat them, join their AD carry at the very least, right? Then it's just perfect. So I don't really think Gamer Legion have like a shot at even the higher seeds. I can see so many teams that would be able to dismantle these guys. We actually have some decent top side teams coming into the tournament, as well as some top laners who haven't necessarily had the best splits, but are looking to be able to prove themselves on the EU Masters stage, and have historically had good runs, like for example Sagenda. And Zanzibar as well, coming in from the jungle, it's very good at recognizing these sorts of advantages that he'd be able to have. I don't really see Gamer Legion even playing up against, I'm not sure if we're going to call a Polish league a minor league, but against some of these more like kind of bridge leagues, these kind of smaller scale leagues either. And, you know, that I could maybe see them taking on some of the Spanish teams, right? But I don't see them taking on the LFL's champions. Well, soon to be champions, currently top of the standings there, 17-1, only dropped one game in LDLC. And as a result, I really can't. If Gamer Legion do make a top 8, then it's dependent on draw, right? And if they make top 4, then I'm assuming there was an upset in another group and they were able to get that in the top 8, right? I don't see them as a top 4 team in this tournament, though. I don't really see them as a top 8 one either.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
so,
I mean, yeah.
Sorry, Exandra, you go.
No, you go.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, because LDLC, 17-1, as soon as they lost that one game, they were like, all right, let's make a roster change straight out the gate. As soon as they drop a single game, they ditch Monk, bring in Hades, and then yeah, everything looks even better from that for them from here on out.
Oh wait, yeah, they're 16-2. Yeah,
16-2 rather.
yeah, because the one game that they dropped was actually the start of the start of the season, and then they didn't drop a single game. Then they dropped one game, and then they dropped Monk. Was how it ended up happening.
It was going to happen eventually. Let's be real. No flame to Monk, of course. High highs, but low lows, as well. Some of these players are prone to doing. But thinking.
I mean,
not only about...
it's funny about LDLC though. In general, though, LDLC and EU Masters, it's like a curse for them.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't have them as winning the whole tournament. I do have to say that outright. I'm excited to see Tinks return to the EU Masters stage from them.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
But I don't believe in it.
Very strong. Vethio is incredible compared to the other mids in the LFL, and I really am pretty hype on him. Honestly.
Well, I'd agree with the second part of what you said.
Yeah, relative to the other mids. Depends on how you see the LFL right now, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, so LDLC curse to EU Masters. Let me tell you about another curse, and that is in Rogue. You mentioned Sagenda and Zanzara.
Yeah.
Woolite and Mystiques. I had them like, all right, they're LEC caliber from last year. They had, they got thrown into fire. They were forged there. And I thought they could be like at least a top 2 bot lane outside of the LEC here. But they're really, really not. Like, even in Poland, they look shaky. Even in the Ultraliga, they look like not elite. And honestly, they look very exposable relative to the rest of Rogue, which is not something we really expected heading into the split. Maybe you expected it because you were that high on Woolite, but
yeah, Woolite's always been like that. I think Mystiques is a major point for them that they could play through though. But I do agree kind of on the characterization of Woolite. Yeah, I was never really like super high on Woolite. I think he's good, but I don't even think he's like a standout in the pantheon of AD carries in the ERLs, right? Like, I think Xmati deserves to be up there. I think Neon deserves to be up there for sure. But Woolite is very, very far from the people who I think would be like outright S+ tier. Right? He has too many inconsistencies. But I think Mystiques has looked very good, especially when they had their playoffs on recently. Shekus lads being serviceable, but Zanzibar is the guy who has been significantly developing when it comes to Rogue, because now we actually see him break out the Rek'Sai and actually play out early game states much more often. He's moving away from how he characterized him last year, and even when he was in the LEC last year for one series, as essentially a tank-only player. He's slowly developing away from that, and that's really good to see. I look forward to seeing Sagenda try to like prove the haters wrong here, because he hasn't been showing up every single game. There were some memes at one point that maybe even Colors was better, which I just completely disagree with. No offense to Colors. But Sagenda, I am looking to see him show up there. And if we're talking about Gamers Legion, that's a top lane 2v2 that I think they could definitely play through. And then obviously the question is, well, is it possible that Woolite will not monster feed while you're playing around phones? Yeah, you know what? There is a chance of that. I do think there is a shot of that, I think they could easily do that. So
yeah.
Okay, so we kind of had to talk about some of the teams in the main stage, but let's kind of go through a couple of the other big names, and I kind of want to hear your opinions on them, because we've got a bit of time. I'm being told that the observers are still crashing. Whether we'll be able to go ahead with the games or not, we're still unsure, because obviously tournament realm crashing is not good for anybody. Let's start off with Schalke Evolution. They are the first seed coming from the Prime League. They arguably, I think, are one of the favorites for the entire competition right now. I think they look very, very solid in their respective league, and the Prime League is the defending champions, so you expect them to be exporting the strongest talent. Schalke Evolution, like, I'll start on you, Ibriz. What do you make of that team?
So I think Veteran made a really, really good point when he said that Neon's addition to the team allows them to play through bot lane now. Inax is nice, but he's a little bit more utility-centric than Neon, who just beasts people left and right by being a clear cut ahead of the rest of the competition. Now that Sir Nukeslot is playing for lane again as well, he learned Thresh finally after 4 years of professional play under his belt. It's a good look for them. The thing about Schalke Evolution, though, is that Lurox plus Certus looked elite as a mid-jungle duo. They were untouchable domestically, and they looked to be set to be untouchable internationally too at the EU Masters. But when Gilius came down, Lurox went up to the main Schalke lineup to try and salvage their season after it was already a bit doomed. They just looked like a completely different team. And when Neon finally came into the roster, when they finally started to gel again, and you saw them actually dominate Mals in playoffs, now they look like legitimate contenders again. But there was a little bit of teething issues. There were, a couple of question marks around the training wheels, and I think the fact that they've now got Larox back as a substitute for EU Masters means that they have an extra dimension that they can explore, where they now have a great mid, very, very solid top laner, and a great bot lane to play through as well.
I've just to update you guys. I have been given an update. Riot has asked us to move all matches to tomorrow. So again, I think we'll be rescheduling. I want to keep this discussion going for a little bit, though, if everyone's happy with it, just because I'm enjoying the discussion. But all matches right now are likely going to be shoved to tomorrow because we're having serious issues with the tournament realm, which means, unfortunately, we will not be able to sort of go ahead with the cast that we had planned today. I want to just throw in a point. I actually think Sleeping is one of the better top laners in this tournament. I think Sleeping is actually pretty solid. Veteran's laughing, but I genuinely think he's pretty solid. Veteran, please elaborate on your laugh and tell me if you think I'm just trolling.
I think you're trolling. Actually,
Okay.
like, I don't know, like sleeping is okay. Sleeping sometimes has some moments where he is very appropriately named. When it comes to his lane-based decisions, he's probably the standout when it comes to them. When it comes to being inconsistent with these kind of lane-based decisions, Certus is a lot better at playing around jungle side of map, about playing properly with wave management, about just playing properly in general. Sleeping's become a little bit of a role player on that team. I think he's the one out of them that is somewhat being carried. I've been told that Sleeping is insane, like, a lot, and I sometimes I do wonder if we're watching the same games. I've had Sleeping on my stream before. So I've had Sleeping on my stream before talking about this. But I don't know. I guess the mistakes that he is making, a lot of people don't understand when certain things that are flips when they occur. But I mean, when it comes to Schalke, talking until they got Neon on, honestly, talking about why they were successful, I feel like you can't talk about them like you talk about other teams. Like we talked about Mouse beforehand when they had the leader roster, right? We couldn't talk about we could talk about individual players when it came there as to why they look so strong. But when it comes to Schalke, I actually think just on a fundamental level, they play out map-based fundamentals vastly better than any of their opponents. And because their opponents, there's such a discrepancy between them and their opponents there, when their opponents make massive mistakes that would just be minor overextensions that probably go uncapitalized versus a team with less understanding, that's when like the whole TP gang are coming in versus them if you're on Schalke 04. That's how they operate, and they're all very, very, very good at playing towards those kinds of errors, and they're just very good at consistently playing on a fundamental level as a 5-man unit. I don't think that gets given enough praise when it comes to them. Everyone's trying to isolate like the singular player that they would always talk about, and until Neon was there was no singular player that I'd always talk about for their success. It's just very impressive what they've been doing as a team, because it implies that what's going on over there at Schalke is not that they're just half-arsing their academy project. These look like guys that will not mess up your plays due to a fundamental misunderstanding if you put them in on the LEC. We're not saying that they're going to be like the next Faker or they're going to be like the next Caps or whatever if you bring them in. What we are saying is that they will be able to function properly in pretty high level concepts, and they do have a good understanding of that. And that's very encouraging to see from an academy program.
I actually have a question. Obviously, with LDLC, Yellow Star playing or in the bot lane, what's he? I actually haven't seen anything of him. What has he looked like coming back as the support for this roster? Has he got it still, or is he more of like a macro player here? Like,
he looks surprisingly decent, to be honest. But when it comes to whether he'll be able to match up against other bot lanes in the tournament, I don't necessarily agree with the current change that they have made, Monk for Hades. And I think that overall, I mean, I'm not buying into like LDLC winning the whole thing again, right? I think, but I don't think you can just say Yellow Star is playing macro right now. Definitely a lot of things he's doing in lane are very good to unlock himself, right? He is unlocking himself in the 2v2, and then he's going around the map and he's doing his thing, but it's not even like he is the one controlling it. I feel like he felt he had to do that when he had Rainover on his team, because Rainover would dogmatically play towards Huni, so Yellow Star had to take care of everything else. But on this team, Tinks is actually just going from strength to strength, so Yellow Star's big displays haven't even necessarily been in terms of macro. They've been, how he's been playing out fights, how he's been approaching fights, and how he's been approaching the 2v2, which is probably different from what a lot of people expect to hear, and he has looked very good doing that.
Yeah, again, though, I think that it's similar to the point I made about Vethio, where these guys look pretty damn convincing for the LFL, but internationally, I do wonder if they will get exposed when it comes to those kind of matchups. And if you are not focusing on their macro play per se, I think that it takes a lot of agency out of their hands when they're faced up against teams that can match them blow for blow in the 2v2s, in the skirmishes, and just when it comes to those smaller decisions that maybe the French teams haven't really been opting into so much.
We can bring this full circle as well, because we were talking about mental resets on the side of Asus. Like, if you think that you are going to get some sort of boost doing this late in the game a switch on your bot lane, it has to be a significant skill boost that you get there if you wanted to translate into any sort of mental reset at all. And I don't really think the discrepancy between Hades and Monk is anywhere close to that sort of thing. I think all they've done is they've brought themselves into a place where they essentially have no synergy and are looking to build that up, but there's very limited amount of games before they get to EU Masters for them to do so.
I mean, LFL went on a month-long break that they could practice in, to be fair. So
yeah, but not on stage, which is always a different thing.
Yeah.
Well, actually, maybe we don't get any stage. Actually, you know, practice social distancing, wash your hands,
I think,
blah blah blah.
I think we don't get a stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it could be online play for everybody here.
Yeah. Wash your hands. Don't
Just
touch
not
your
today.
face.
No online
Play
play
that
today,
one,
unfortunately.
you know?
Okay, guys, I want to quickly talk. I'm just waiting on confirmation for the shift to tomorrow, by the way, guys. I haven't been told whether it is 100% final or not yet. I want to touch on the UKLC. It's a region that has been doing better and better in the European Masters, but has never really fulfilled the potential of two academy rosters, really, with Fnatic and Excel. Fnatic have done pretty well in the last two, but I think a lot of people, I remember the spring of 2019, everybody was hyping the crap out of Fnatic. Like, it was like Fnatic are crushing scrims, Fnatic are beating everybody, Fnatic are coming in to be the winners, and then they didn't. Obviously, that was the leader show back then. But yeah, they just didn't obviously make it work. What do we think of Fnatic and Excel? Because Excel dropped the perfect split to Fnatic in the UKLC finals. They got reverse swept in like sad fashion, to be honest with you, but they got reverse swept. So what do we think of these two teams coming from the UKLC? Ibris, Fnatic Rising and BT Excel. What do you rate their chances?
So I think they both have very, very strong AD carries. Of course, we rated Xmatty in that elite with Neon. I think Deadly's just slightly below that. Both of them kind of suffer from not playing non-traditional marksmen. They are both very much, your big attack damage carry players, no real mage threat of having any of that flexed around. The thing about these two teams is that their junglers are both vastly different. Taxa had the season of his life, and I attribute a lot of their undefeated streak to A, him being insanely good, and B, the fact that the rest of the competition in the UKLC kind of floundered around. Like, Sybil challenged him a little bit, but it still wasn't enough to compensate for the laning discrepancy of these teams. And just, okay, so we have AD carries that are basically the same. You have junglers that are stylistically different, but both have high-ish highs. Dan is more of a facilitator than any real standout, honestly, but he's a lot more consistent than Taxa. But the mid matchup is where people are looking, because you have Special, who played in LEC for XL. He's considered too good for regional leagues, but not good enough for that biggest stage quite yet. And you have Magic Felix, who has always been, this hyped up prospect that could never really translate his solo queue games onto the stage. But guess what? We're not on stage anymore, so maybe he can play like it's an online party and Gigasmurf.
I think it's an interesting one to talk about. I'd love to get a veteran's opinion on this, because you highlight some interesting differences. I think you could split hairs between Matty and Deadly. I think they're both very, very good players. I think the mid lane matchup is where I do want to get some insight from veteran, and that jungle matchup, because the way that the junglers played is very differently. Taxa had like the lowest gold difference at 15 out of any of the junglers, but he would sometimes just go to lane to apply pressure and allow them to push a wave in, or he'd just sometimes go to lane just to be there, and he'd give up stuff just to facilitate how good his laners were. And I think this is a conscious decision by XL, realizing that Taxa, like skill wise, individually, maybe mechanically or carry potential wise, is probably one of the lower end on XL, but he has some excellent laners to work with. And I think often he'd just play specifically to make his laners get some kind of advantage in lane. That's the way that the people were kind of talking about it when it came to the UKLC. But I'd love to get your opinion here, Veteran, on what you think of these two teams coming out of the UKLC.
I mean, that aspect is very important for any jungler. And the thing is, it's not like Dan wasn't doing that aspect as well. Dan is just a lot more efficient at it. Dan's actually the only jungler that I'm really genuinely excited to see go up against Tinks. I really want to see what happens when Tinks versus Dan occurs. And then Shinkrov would be the other jungler in the ERLs that I would have loved to see doing that. But he's not here, right? Zanzara, I'm getting a lot more excited about because he's actually picked up the Rek'Sai. He is actually broadening his playstyle a lot. So we have potentially 3 very intelligent junglers coming in, and I count Dan as one of them. Taxter is a guy that they have figured out how to play around, but I think Taxter is a guy who's benefited a lot from the strength of Special in particular. I know I have a bunch of my fans in there, so can I get a start Special in the chat, please? And with Special in particular, yeah, Magic Felix was the only one who could take the fight to Special. I don't see very many mid laners in the entire tournament who can take the fight to Special at all, including on Gamers Legion, for example. Like, that's just another team that I see them having a significant disadvantage on, and also because I don't think Excel's top side is actually that good. Taxa plus Sendo. I do think their bot side is good, but I do think Xmati is like a tier above Deadly for sure. Okay. The issue when it comes to Fnatic, and the issue for a while, has actually been Bravado. Bravado's being where there's being kind of like a sore spot there. Generally speaking, Dan would look a bit like double aim sometimes, in the sense of that it appears that Dan is trying to do this thing alone when it should be like a jungle support sort of thing, and Bravado's not necessarily there. Bravado's Taric is obviously really, really, really good, but it took a while for Bravado to finally come into his own and not just look like a grandmaster support who found his way here, but actually look like a guy who was competing for top 10 in solo queue at one point. But he is here now. Dan put on absolute clinic, especially in the last game versus XL, to finally topple their undefeated streak. And now I think they do look very competitive. But the big but is I'm still not convinced by Pride on the top lane. I think the standard of top lane in the UK league has been fairly low anyway. But Pride, even with that, his issues do look a bit obvious there, right? And any team that's coming in with like a stronger top and jungle could potentially take them out. So, for example, I would imagine you would want to avoid Rogue if you were Fnatic right now. LDLC may actually look to do something with Bando there. Bando is historically very good if he's playing against his old teams. When he was on Fnatic last year, when he was on Fnatic Rising last year, he took out LDLC, which was his previous team. Now, if I see him on LDLC versus Fnatic Rising, I'd expect maybe they're going to do something with that. He performs pretty well when he wants to get revenge. This is the kind of area I'd be looking to kind of abuse on them. And also, I need to see Bravado continue to play really well, because otherwise Xmati's not really going to be able to take on the likes of Neon, right? There are still some really strong AD carries here. I think Mystique's is really, really good, and Woolite is actually particularly good in lane, so long as he's not in an isolated scenario. He is particularly good if his support can follow up. So there are other areas where they could potentially be abused here. But I'm looking forward to seeing if Magic Felix can come up again, because he's always being hyped up. He is like the solo queue god. This guy literally just runs a stream that isn't even cropped properly, and you have to use a magnifying glass to see what he's doing, with no cam, no voice, no sounds, no nothing, and gets 1,000 viewers regularly because his reputation is just that strong, right? And I want to see him continue to play out laning phase well, and then playing out side lane better than almost any other laner in the entirety of the ERLs right now. And I want to see Dan facilitate his team up towards that point. But then we do need to see them close. We need to see that synergy. We need to see their top laner not necessarily dying permanently. We need to see Dan and Bravado working together as a unit. We need to see a bunch of this stuff, or else they're not going to make the deep run that they should, and not going to be contesters for the title.
I'm being told that we're going to be wrapping up here. Everything has been pushed till tomorrow. We're seeing significant connectivity issues on live tournament. Valorant is basically screwing stuff up. So essentially, I want to just get one last word from you guys, and I want to make it fairly quick. If you had to pick one of the group stage or play-in teams, but I imagine group stage teams that you think would be your potential winner just from the outset, reputation alone, based on skill, who would you choose to take the title this year?
I'll go first because Veteran will have more to say than I will, especially about my pick. But Giants, everyone's riding high on. They didn't have much competition. It seemed like they did during regular split, and then it all kind of fell apart in playoffs. But in particular, when Veteran was talking about the bot lanes of Fnatic, of Rogue, of all these other teams, my mind was just going to Attila and Erdot for Giants in that bottom lane. Have been so consistent. They have been so good. And yeah, the pop-off potential there is limitless. I think that, of course, you can expose the rest of the map. Well, except the Antonio, because the guy's a rock. Well, I give him a lot of credit when I maybe shouldn't, but hey, it's all good.
You really want those Twitter followers, don't you? What's your opinion on Whirlib?
Well,
this is the real
Master
test.
Master King. But Attila, Erdut, very, very good bot lane in and of themselves, and I think that if Giants are to make a splash, it will be through that lane.
Okay, and Veteran, choosing one team that you think could take the whole thing.
I'm going to say that right now, I actually think this is the most wide open EU Masters we've had yet. And every other EU Masters, I have not said that. Generally, every other EU Masters, I'm like, Mouse is going to win this, Big is going to win this, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's normally really clear-cut for me. This year, it's not clear-cut for me. Part of that might be because I can see every team has at least one particular flaw. So what I'll try to do is name a team that I expect to make a deep run that maybe people don't expect to make a deep run. So, for example, I actually think Rogue did look shaky a bit in the regular split, have the potential to actually make a deep run in this particular tournament. And a lot of people are criticizing, sometimes correctly, Sigender and Mystiques and some of their performances. I really do think that they have the potential to go maybe even all the way in this tournament. When it comes to your statement on Giants, I'm actually not like I'm not opposed to the idea that Giants would be one of the favorites in this tournament. I do think the level of Spanish League as a whole has decreased, but I'm not necessarily opposed to them. I do love that you brought up their bot lane though, because Erdot, it really genuinely surprised me this year. He genuinely did, and I think he's gone from strength to strength. Attila, obviously, I've been very vocal that I didn't think he was the problem with the Vitality bot lane at all. Yeah, there was some very obvious issues. But yeah, I'm not necessarily opposed to Giants being one of these teams. I think if a team does surprise people, though, it will be that Rogue team. I do look forward to seeing what they do in this tournament. But this tournament is too close to call a winner, right? It could be Schalke. Mouse could maybe, not Mouse, yeah, it is Mouse. Mouse could maybe come up and just their individual skill could propel them forward if maybe they manage to dodge Schalke in one or other aspect, or maybe we'll see like a similar situation to last year where Big lost to Mouse and then beat Mouse at EU Masters, right? Maybe we'll see a similar situation to that. But right now, there is no clear-cut victor. It's everyone's game, and most of you guys have a shot at winning. Most of you guys. Not Mad Lions, but most of you guys have a shot.
Okay, guys, it's been fun. I think we had a good chat here. Obviously, can't keep the show going forever as we have no games to show you. So we will be back tomorrow. Well, I won't be back tomorrow, but everybody else should be here back tomorrow because we'll be running with our essentially the same schedule, but just tomorrow. So we'll see you again at the same time on the same channels, and we'll dive into the second day of the European Masters play-ins. We'll see you soon.
Twitch TV/veteran EU.